committed to try to fix things, to correct the wrongs of the past, to try to rebuild a destroyed land that resulted in your being here and in other places all over the world, to try to once again find our place back in the Committee of Nations and restore all the things that we know our country has the potential to be. We know that we have natural endowment, a lot of it, in all areas, minerals, forestry, agriculture, marine, and we also know that was the basis upon which we could build, and so from 2006 we've been on this journey. It's taken us a long ways. We've made a lot of progress, no doubt about it, but we also have a lot of constraints and a lot of challenges. Challenges of capacity, challenges of integrity, challenges of poor infrastructure, all of those things that keep us from meeting the agenda that we have set. But, you know, we did a lot. We fixed the debt problem. We started to, schools and hospitals and all have opened, and we brought back our traditional productive operations, and we began to try to open up. We tried, more importantly, what we did was to say that democracy and the freedoms that people enjoy had long been denied, and we were going to, despite all the obstacles, we're going to allow people free speech and free association and freedom of religion and all those things that make the human being much more comfortable, much more ability to feel that they belong and that they have a future that belongs to them. We also face shocks. Many of you we tried to bring back home. Some came back home and did good things, some came back home and did bad things. And so some of the disappointment we face when we make this clarion call everywhere we go and say, Liberians, come back home. You have to rebuild your country. Nobody's going to do it for you. No? And some have responded to that and continue to respond to that. And so, where we are now, our economy was growing, had reached 9.5% in the year 2012. We had already prepared our 2030 long-term perspective vision. Our anticipation was to become a middle-income country by the year 2030. We had an agenda for transformation, with a 5-year slice of that, all of our priorities listed. 2014, we faced the first shock with a decline in global prices of our major exports, iron ore and rubber, and our growth dropped to 5.9%, and we were beginning to see how can we get our diversification program in place to keep the economy growing, to get our infrastructure programs on track, and then 2014 Ebola hit. And that really drove things right down to the bottom. Growth plummeted to 0%, and more importantly, we were faced with this unknown enemy called Ebola, something that we did not know, something we had never dealt with before. And so you know the story. You saw all of the terrifying photographs on your television screens of people dying, people crying, people praying, people just not knowing what to do. But we got in touch with most of our partners. We called for help. We first started off on a wrong note. We started to quarantine people, restrict the movement, close schools, stop all public gatherings, put the security out to make sure that they reinforce those restrictions. And yet, it went on. Our doctors died, our nurses died. We then knew that we had to change course. We got out to the world and got the world to support us. And let me say, the United States responded. We then knew we had to put this whole thing in charge of our communities. We formed an incident management team. Torben Iswar here headed that team. He's here with me, and he can talk to you if those of you have interest in understanding what we did. But we also then empowered our communities to take responsibility, to take ownership, and to be able to really take charge of the whole thing, and that worked. That worked. I headed a President Advisory Committee that met weekly to look at what Torben and his people were doing, to make sure that we had our strategies and our responses right. We had our donors in there with us to examine their own programs and how there was a harmony between what we sought to do, what they were able to provide. And that brought a whole concentration of coordination and management to our system that enabled us to have the success that we have. And so even though over 10,000 people our people died, the highest among the 3 countries, Sierra Leone and Guinea being the other ones, we were able to move very quickly in containing it. We declared Ebola free early in, what time was that, Torben? May? In May, and then I think in September we had an outbreak, but we were able to go and control that outbreak very quickly, demonstrating to everybody that now we had in place the response capability to deal with it, and thereby restored the confidence of our people and also the international community. We had great partnership. We couldn't have done it alone. Partnership from the United States, from many of our other partners in Europe, in Asia. They all came to our help because we told them, this was not a threat for Liberia or Sierra Leone or Guinea or West Africa. It was a threat for the world. And they responded in that state. Today we're starting back on our program of reconstruction. We've identified our 4 key priority areas. First of all, health. I mean, obviously, the weaknesses of our health system that was exposed during the Ebola experience just tells us that we have to do more. We have to be able to send medical services, not just in the capital cities, but way into rural areas, to make sure that we have staff there that can deal with infection control, thereby ensuring that we don't have a recurrence of the disease or anything like it. We already are a malaria-prone country. That's one of the greatest killers. So health is key. Training more doctors and nurses, ensuring that, again, our communities are more empowered to continue to serve as first responders in controlling diseases in their community. Education. I'm quite sure all of you have heard the thing that I still can't live down. I say the educational system is a mess. Every day I'm still facing with somebody say, oh yeah, you say it's a mess and you made it a mess. Okay, well, we all made it a mess, but now we've got to fix the mess, right? And so we're trying to work. We brought in a new young Minister of Education, young like yourself, with abilities like yourself, and he's got a reform program underway. We hope we can really make a difference in trying to reform it, making sure that the schools are properly equipped, that teachers, part of the problem is with all their best intention, most of the teachers just did not have the qualification to be teaching the children. They did their best, but they didn't. And because, as you know, most of the trained teachers left the country during the different periods of our conflict, whether it was the coup d'etat or whether it was the 2 decades of conflict, they all left, and the return is slow. And so training teachers take a long time. But what we're trying to do now is he's got a rapid intensified program ongoing. We've been trying to recruit teachers. Nigeria is helping us with teachers and doctors in the two areas, and we hope that that reform program will go a long way within the next few years. Infrastructure. I'm sure you get this year the rains have just been so excessive. Climate change, as you study about it in your schools and in your work, it is real. I don't know if you feel it in Seattle, but I can tell you, we feel it in Liberia because the rains have just, destroyed the roads. As you know, most of our roads are laterite roads. We've been trying to pave some of them, and we're making a success at that. We do have some of the major, and we made a commitment as we're going to try to pave all the inter-county primary roads so that people at least can get from one county to another. You can go to Basso now in an hour, and so you can now go to Ganta in about 3 hours. Those are all paved roads. We're still working on Lofa and some of the others. They're starting up paving from Harper to Fishtown, and we're trying to hope we can connect it to Zwedru, and then on to Ganta through Saclepied and through Tapita. But those are all ongoing projects. If the rains can just give us some time, we should be able to do that. Power. Another major major constraint to us being able to do the things, even if we build the schools and equip them properly and build the hospitals and put proper equipment, if you don't have reliable power. Students can't get the best of an education because they can't get on the internet and do distance learning. In the hospitals, if you don't have reliable power, all the machines break down. And so getting power, right now we're way far behind. The hydro should have come on stream, the reconstruction of it, December 2015, but because of Ebola, it's now delayed till 2016, December. In the meanwhile, we have other units that will be coming on stream between November and April that will increase the supply of power. We already have under the West Africa power pool situation. We have lights coming from Ivory Coast that are being able to supply 18 of the communities along the border with Ivory Coast, Maryland, Grand Jide, Nimba, and River G. So they all should be, once the transmission distribution work is concluded, they should be able to get lights, even as we move on some of the other areas. So water and sanitation, again, part of our infrastructure program. I don't know the numbers to say, but I know we've been trying to increase those who have access to water, and the Ebola thing just drove that need right to our realization and our strong action, because having in the schools and in the hospitals, having access to clean water and good sanitation is an important preventive measure for infectious disease. And so that's something that we're all trying to stress. And the final one, of course, is agriculture. We are an agrarian nation, and so we have not perhaps put as much attention. Liberia traditionally is a tree crop country, rubber being our major export, and oil palm, coffee, cocoa, all of those things, all of which had gone into a state of disrepair over the years of conflict, trying to get them reactivated, trying to do the replanting that is now going on in all of those areas take time. We're working on it at the same time, diversifying to get large-scale agriculture. Some of the constraints, every time you do one good thing, you got a lot of consequences. And so while we're trying to encourage large-scale agriculture, particularly in our oil palm area, we're also doing land reform. And as you know today, that land reform says we're going to have the communities own the land, and that's a big issue, because right now every community is saying No, you can't. You can't bring anybody here to come and develop this land because the land belongs to me. So we have to find a way to manage the processes of change, manage those things that are good for them, but at the same time, make sure that you enable other kinds of benefits that they cannot, of their own resources, they cannot access, they cannot do. Make sure that we do that. So we're going through that. You know that we're going through constitutional reform, constitutional amendment, through amendment. That's going on. There's some key areas, one of which I'm sure interests you, and that has to do with dual citizenship. The group that met in, first of all, for the constitutional amendment, there are certain things in there like reducing the tenure of the president from 6 to 4 years, reducing the tenure of legislators from 6 to 6 and 4 years, making sure that that there's women empowerment through the quota system. Dual citizenship. These are some of the things included in the amendments. After 2 years of going through the process of our Vision 2030, going through the whole process of consultations and all of that, finally a representative group met in Banga from all areas of society, all representation, all ethnic groups or counties, they all met